Good morning. It's Wednesday, the 10th of January here in London. This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Bitcoin whipsaws after the SEC's X account is hacked and posts a fake approval for a spot ETF.
Boeing CEO fights back tears as he admits a mistake in the wake of a mid-flight blowout.
And ebbing support, David Cameron says he's worried that Israel might have broken international law in Gaza.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The Securities and Exchange Commission says its social media account falsely posted that Bitcoin ETFs had been approved. The US regulator's account on X was hacked, a hoax that sent the price of Bitcoin swinging. Our SEC reporter Ben Bain explains why the breach was so well timed.
There's been this speculation mounting for weeks that the SEC is coming up against this January 10th deadline to approve or disapprove one of these spot Bitcoin ETFs. And everyone has been kind of getting on this. This is the big moment when perhaps crypto and Bitcoin in particular will take a step towards the mainstream. So kind of everyone's on razor's edge.
We're still waiting for that decision, though. Bain says after today's events, it's unlikely to feature on X first. The Elon Musk-owned site says an identified hacker had obtained a phone number associated with the SEC's handle and used it to gain entry. The incident raises fresh questions about X's reliability as a source of information. Meanwhile, US law enforcement are investigating how Wall Street's main regulator was compromised.
Boeing's CEO has acknowledged that the company quote, mistake after a door plug ejected from a 737 MAX 9 plane during an Alaska Airlines flight last week. Fighting back tears, Dave Calhoun said that the plane maker must own up to its shortcomings as he records seeing photographs of the plane's damaged fuselage.
I didn't know what happened to whoever was supposed to be in the seat next to that hole in the airplane. I got kids, I got grandkids, and so do you. This stuff matters. Everything matters. Every detail matters. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. This isn't a lecture, not by any stretch. It's nothing more than a reminder of the seriousness with which we have to approach our work.
Dave Calhoun's remarks came during a company-wide meeting at its 737 factory near Seattle, which was called to reinforce safety as Boeing's top priority. US regulators have grounded 171 of Boeing's 737 MAX 9 aircraft and ordered inspections after the Alaska Airlines incident.
The main chip-making supplier for Apple and Nvidia has posted better than expected sales for the fourth quarter. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing says that demand from artificial intelligence players helped offset sagging smartphone and laptop chip sales. December sales came in at $55.7 billion, with earnings for the quarter matching the same period a year earlier. The results come as TSMC's key customer Apple has faced growing headwinds in recent months, with several analysts downgrading the tech giant on expectations of soft demand.
Blackrock will cut about 600 jobs, or roughly 3% of its global workforce, as it seeks to reallocate resources amid rapid changes in asset management. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet has the story.
CEO Larry Fink and President Bob Capito said in a memo to staff, quote, "We see our industry changing faster than at any time since the founding of Blackrock." The executives say ETFs have become the preferred vehicle for both index and active investment strategies, and that the firm is growing across the globe, including in Europe and Asia. The world's largest asset manager says it still expects to have a larger staff by the end of the year, even with the cuts, as it expands certain parts of the business. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
The British Foreign Secretary says he's concerned about Israel's military conduct in Gaza, marking a heightened tone of scepticism towards the campaign from the UK. Speaking to a committee of lawmakers in Parliament, David Cameron said he's scrutinising the conflict daily.
Am I worried that Israel has taken action that might be in breach of international law because this particular premises has been bombed or whatever? Yes, of course I'm worried about that, and that's why I consult the Foreign Office lawyers when giving this advice on arms exports. If you put it that way, I'm happy to say, yes, of course, every day I look at what's happened and ask questions about, is this in line with international humanitarian law? Could the Israelis have done better to avoid civilian casualties? Of course I do that.
During the hearing, David Cameron also called on Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to allow aid into Gaza. The news comes as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged Israeli leaders to control settler violence in the West Bank and stop undercutting Palestinian governance during a briefing in Tel Aviv on the same day.
Now, in further UK news, a minister here is calling on councils to use their emergency reserves to fund day-to-day spending if required. The remarks have been criticised by both the Labour Party and local government experts. Bloomberg's James Walcock has more.
The Local Government Association has warned 1 in 5 councils are on the brink of bankruptcy in the next 24 months. It was at their conference Councils Minister Simon Hoare said authorities should use rainy day funds to help balance the town hall budget. The LGA responded to say using contingency money was, quote, a little bit misguided and may merely delay the problem. Labour called it ridiculous. The remarks underline government efforts to head off the wave of bankruptcies predicted by the sector ahead of a general election. In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
Those are the markets. In a moment, we're going to bring you more on the social media hack at the US Securities and Exchange Commission at a really crucial time. This long-awaited decision on a Bitcoin ETF. That in a moment. But first, a word on the Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun. You heard a little bit of it there. He was speaking to the whole company at the Seattle factory about safety, obviously in the wake of the very serious incident on Alaska Airlines that didn't cause any fatalities, so fortunately, but obviously has raised these very serious questions about the working process of Boeing, and it's led to the grounding of planes.
I mean, we said it there a moment ago that he was fighting back tears. You don't really hear it, I think, when you hear Dave Calhoun speak at that moment, but he did get quite choked up in referencing his own kids and grandkids when talking about the importance of safety in a plane. Whether or not that message is going to appease any of the people who are worried about safety on Boeing planes, though, I mean, it's still an open question. But he was
very careful to thank the Alaska Airlines crew and executives, for example, for managing to get the plane on the ground. You know, he was I think also trying to give a message to his own people just about the seriousness of having to deal with, well, what could be a very, very difficult issue for Boeing once more again.
Yeah, and it's worth remembering that Dave Calhoun was brought in 2020 to take over the role after the last major crisis that Boeing faced as well, when we had those 2 crashes and more than 300 people killed. Another major safety crisis around the 737 MAX model as well.
Nearly 5 years ago, though.
Yes, indeed. So this is, I suppose, the latest challenge facing Boeing as a plane maker, but interesting to reflect on the tone of that address. The first time we've heard from Dave Calhoun since that incident aboard the Alaska Air flight. Yeah. OK, let's turn our attention now then to, well, it was the highly anticipated decision, still is, about a Bitcoin ETF. Suddenly became a major cybersecurity incident, with the SEC chairman having to put out a tweet late on Tuesday to say that a Bitcoin ETF had not been approved by the US regulator and that an unauthorised tweet was posted on the official SEC Gov account. Joining us now to discuss is our senior crypto editor, Sunil Jagtiani. Good morning, Sunil. Welcome to the programme. What do we know then? Good morning. What do we know then about who was behind this hack on X, I should say?
Well, that's still something of a mystery. The social media site X have said in a post that what they've described as an unidentified individual got control of a phone number that was linked to the SEC's X account via a third party. And that's how they say that the account was compromised. So we don't know exactly who was behind it. The SEC has said it's going to work with law enforcement to figure out what happened, and that the fake post wasn't by the agency or its staff. And X also claims that the SEC account in question didn't have a security protocol known as two-factor authentication activated when this incident happened. But the regulator has yet to comment on that. I think it's pretty likely that we'll see many more details coming out in the days ahead as the SEC responds to the situation.
How damaging is it for the SEC that this incident happened now, when there's so much focus on them, given that we're waiting for the approval of that spot ETF?
Yeah, the focus makes it especially damaging. But, if you step back, the SEC also regulates a bunch of companies and regularly warns them that they have to counteract the danger of cybersecurity incidents. So it also reprimands those companies. So it's at the very least pretty embarrassing. And some US lawmakers, despite the late time of day in the US, are already demanding that the SEC has to explain what's happened. The SEC has a protocol in place for the companies it oversees if they suffer an incident, and they have to go and report within a matter of days and explain what they'll do to avoid a recurrence. And the lawmakers are asking the SEC to do the same thing. So overall, it's not a good look at the very least.
No, absolutely. What about the impact on Bitcoin trading then? We talked about it being whipsawed and it's up a little bit this morning. How would you characterize the impact?
So the background is that Bitcoin has rallied pretty strongly in the past 12 months because people are anticipating this ETF announcement. It's up more than 160%. When the announcement, the fake post landed, there was a gap of maybe 5 or 10 minutes before it became clear that that was a fake post. In that window, Bitcoin rallied a bit and then it began to sell off. But they weren't particularly big moves, given that Bitcoin can be very volatile. But what that performance maybe suggests, it might give a clue as to what happens if and when we get the actual announcement. People have been saying that given the big rally, there's a risk of what they call a sell the news event. So when this eventually lands, traders might take some money off the table thinking they've got the best of the run for now. So there was a hint of that in the price action. And as you say, since then, things have stabilized. And we're not really far off in terms of the price of Bitcoin compared to where we were before the whole drama kicked off.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.